And when you're talking to the people who really do know what they're talking about,
The approach that I took was just not being afraid to ask those questions and not making assumptions.
it's an arms race in terms of equipment, in terms of way of delivering the media, way of loads and loads of different companies trying to win. It's a little bit like a marriage, isn't it?
What we hear a lot is our customers say, when things get challenging, we pick up the phone and call Consult Red. The intelligence that actually lives within that device now is phenomenal, and it's way beyond anything we've ever seen before.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the GCS Connect Leaders series. We've got John Barlow today. He's the Director of Strategic Accounts for Consult Red, which is a technology consulting company that generally work within the connected devices area, something that GCS is also very kind of focused in, particularly around broadcast. The conversation is one that's very illuminating because John's background coming from mainly HR through to project management, through to engineering, and now through to sales. I think it gives a lot of people a lot of hope that obviously you're not channeled into one particular avenue, and that you can grow your career as a leader in many different avenues, and there are lots of universal skills that you can take forward. John's obviously got a lot of interesting things, and Consult Red have got a lot of interesting things to say about technology, how it's evolving and how it continues to evolve, and how that means they also have to evolve the types of people they have, the types of projects they work on, the types of accounts and customers that they work with. So I think it's really interesting to hear from John, someone that basically has many skills and lots of things to say, as well as being, it seems, an expert drummer, which is something we find out right at the end. So look forward to that one. So without further ado, here's John. Good afternoon, John. How are you?
Afternoon, yeah. Good, David. And yourself?
Yeah, very well today. Yes, the sun is starting to shine a little bit more in the UK, which has been 6 months of winter. So nice to get out of it finally. So
Yeah, it feels like it's been a long winter.
it definitely has. It definitely has, and you're probably not to the end of it. You're up north anyway, so you're probably you're used to these sort of things, John. So, so we've got John Barlow with us today. He's the head of strategic accounts, director of strategic accounts for Consult Red, who we'll find out more of. Very much a leader in technology, embedded technology, particularly in the broadcast and networks and telecoms fields, and a company that we are well aware of at GCS and really respect. So it's great to have someone from Consult Red on the podcast. I think, John, as I always do, I get people to explain a little bit about their journey. But what I firstly wanted to do was just understand, when we talk about director for strategic accounts, I just think it's quite important for people to understand what that actually involves, and what your job on a day-to-day basis is. And then that will kind of help us as we kind of talk a little bit about your journey, how you've got to be in this position, which is obviously a very important position for your business, but not necessarily if you'd looked at your background where you thought you would have started. So can you just explain what a director for strategic accounts does first?
Absolutely, yeah. So when it comes to my role at Red, it's really, there are a number of really important clients of ours that, we've had long-standing relationships with, and it's really about where values align, and you have a common view of where things are heading. And I think that for us is what determines what a strategic account is. I think a lot of people determine that by value and pounds and pence, but it's not always the case. Sometimes it's more about values being aligned, and kind of strategic direction being aligned. So for us at Consult Red, it's really about making sure that where we are aligned, we pay the proper attention to those clients, and we make sure that they get what they need from what we do, and hopefully that we work a long time together, and collaborate into the future.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I know that obviously, I mean, Consult Red is well known for its long-standing relationship. So it's obviously a key kind of part of your business in what you do. And I think, that's where it kind of comes in for me to looking a little bit about your background, John. Obviously, if you want to just take us through a little bit about your journey, because I think it's quite interesting for me to speak to someone like you who would probably be we class it as a sales or customer focused background, but it's probably quite interesting for our listeners to understand where you come from and how you've got here.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, it's been a bit of a strange one, probably compared to a lot of people that I see that are doing a similar role in the industry. Certainly, what I see around me is a lot of people have come from that kind of real engineering background. So they've got, they've come through software or hardware engineering, um, you know, progressed through their career and moved on, and then they've decided to take that. Okay, I can take that and build on that and move into more of a sales role if that's the direction they wish to take. So often that's the path that I see. But for me, it's well, I'm not from an engineering background at all. I guess first and foremost, so I'm not an engineer. And actually, my I guess going back probably 12 or 13 years ago is when I really took my pivot into what I started to consider my career, which was within pay TV. So I was working for a company that many will know called Pace at the time. But I was actually working in human resources. I was in HR working for Pace at the time. And there was kind of this pivotal point that I was to, and I could go deep into the niche of what I was doing at the time, which was not really HR, but kind of technical HR, so I was like a functional consultant. So I was doing a technology type role, um, but there was this path that allowed me to consider taking a different route, which at the time was project management, more in line with what the business were doing. We're delivering set top boxes and broadband products. So I opted to take that path and set off on this journey of being a project manager. The idea was as part of my because it was a developmental role, right? It was about learning the skills as I go along, and the idea was spend kind of 6 months in software, 6 months in hardware, 6 months operations, and then a bit in project management to give me kind of a bit of all round experience. Because as I say, I hadn't come from that engineering world. Um, and what happened in reality is I got about 6 months in, and we needed to deliver a particular project, and we were short on project managers at the time. And yeah, so it was okay. Maybe could you help look at this particular project? So yeah, that was my first kind of thrown into the deep end really in terms of project management. And then yeah, I continued to do that kind of a role for a few years at Pace, and then I moved on to Skyworth. I worked for Skyworth for 5 years, doing a similar role, but helping to grow that kind of European base when it came to Skyworth. And yeah, then there came another pivotal point for me of going, okay, I can continue down this road of doing project management and delivering projects, which I really enjoyed. But one of the things that I found was in delivering Android TV projects in particular, like historically set top box projects were kind of you got to the end, you delivered it, you started the manufacturing process, and then that project was done. It kind of turned into this maintenance phase, and it was only really brought back up again if something went wrong. In Android TV world, it's very different in that actually you've got you have to keep on top of doing software builds, and you have to be always on the latest and greatest version of Android. So I found my relationships with customers was changing in that I wasn't just doing this kind of ship and forget. I was moving to this model of okay, you do the first project and then continue to work with them on another kind of maintenance period, if you like, and then deliver the next project. So I was getting really good, deep relationships with some of these customers, which I really enjoyed, and that was a part of the job that I enjoyed. And then that's when I got to this next part of saying, well, I can carry on doing that, or I could take this more kind of commercial focused role, which is very account focused and about getting out there and having conversations, understanding problems in a bit more depth rather than being focused on the delivery. So that's kind of where I got to where I am, and this commercial role I find myself in now, which I really enjoy. I think the getting out there, speaking with customers, meeting people, like we've met a few times, and others in the industry, I find really interesting.
For others listening, thinking about moving from this kind of, from people to technology to sales, what were the challenges? Because obviously there are common skills that you can have, but what were the real kind of challenges for you to push yourself further and kind of put yourself outside your comfort zone? And what would be your advice to people that want to do that and want to do it successfully as you have done?
So yeah, it's a really good question. I remember there was a really specific point, and I found myself sat with my manager in that first 6 months that I talked about, and saying to him like, "Well, I have no idea how to lay out a circuit board. I have no idea how to do a schematic or hardware design. Like, what gives me the authority to be able to go in as a project manager and shape this project and set the direction for this project?" And and actually, I got some really good advice at that time, which was the it's not about you. I didn't need to have that knowledge. Actually, what the value I was bringing to some degree was the fact that I didn't know about the subject area. So as a project manager, you kind of have to be inquisitive. You have to really get under the nuts and bolts of what's going on. And I found that forced me to ask more and more questions about what was going on in the project, and to get to build that understanding whilst we're delivering. And by doing that, it naturally just brings stuff to the surface that you wouldn't realize. So for me, it was it, the challenge. Well, what I thought was the challenge was actually that I didn't know the role, but I found asking more questions helped me and helped those around me to have a better output. So I think it's yeah, I'd say that was a what I thought was a challenge, but the lesson there for me was actually it's probably not that big of a challenge really. I think you just need to start, give it a go, and then see where it takes you.
So almost more of an advantage if you're thinking outside the box, improving the process, to actually not be ingrained in certain ways of thinking, ways of working. You can kind of look at it and say, "Hang on, why are we doing it like this?"
Yeah, I think so. And I think, if I'd have come from an engineering background, let's say, and, I'd come across a particular problem, let's say it was a small project team and I had a hardware background and I went in and it was a hardware related issue, there might be certain things that I would overlook because there's certain things I already know. So they're kind of preconceived things that I understand. And you might miss something by doing that. Whereas I think that approach of saying, well, leave no stone unturned. Let's look under all of these things and just make sure that even the fundamental things are all there. I mean that you won't miss those things. And yeah, I found that was actually an advantage for me as I kind of progressed through my career in project management.
And when you're talking to the people who really do know what they're talking about, you know, how do you deal with that? Because obviously that's sometimes a difficult thing when you're kind of coming in and people are saying you haven't got the stripes, you haven't got the experience. You know, how do you? I guess the word is, how do you win those people over?
It's difficult because it's quite daunting at first, especially when these are people who've got um, you know PhDs in their engineering field, right? They're very very intelligent people, and it is quite daunting because first of all, you don't really know what questions to ask, so you kind of a lot of the unknown unknowns. And I think the approach that I took, which I think worked seemed to work well for me, was just not being afraid to ask those questions and not making assumptions, and trying to go in with a cautious confidence, if you like, by saying, I'm confident enough to kind of just pause the question for a second to understand a little bit of something that I didn't fully understand, get people to maybe explain it in a slightly different way. And I think one of the, I guess, one of the other things that I did and what I saw the role of a project manager as being is and again, it was the same person who gave me that great advice from earlier, also said it's a bit like being at the front of a train. And you've got your engineers that are keeping the train going, and you just have to kind of lay the track. So if something gets in the way of that train, your job as a PM is to get that thing out the way so the rest of the train can keep moving. And I think where I was able to add value for those people working in the project is I took away that noise and took away that, like, they didn't have to focus on certain things. It allowed them to do what they did well. And it allowed, I took away those blockers and did the thing that I was there to do, which was to keep the project on track.
And if you move into a kind of a more, like we said, of a customer focused role, and you've worked in that technology project and delivered those projects, again, that's moving into a new area for you, and you're learning things. And I guess you're more confident doing it because you've done it once or twice already, so you kind of feel confident. But what were the main differences you found in that more kind of customer focused, client focused, maybe even target focused type role? Because this is
Yeah,
my
I
world.
think
Obviously, I'm a recruiter, right? So I'm always selling and trying to hit targets and stuff. So
I think that I found there was a lot of commonality. I still find there's a lot of commonality because a big part of what I do now is still about understanding what the problems are. What are the problems that a client or a customer is experiencing? Because it's I'm going in there to hopefully help them to with a solution that's going to fix those problems or contribute to fixing those problems. So it's a lot of the same things apply between those two in terms of you have to have good ability for questioning and getting under the surface of, when someone says something or this is what I need, to be able to go, okay, is that the real need, or is that masking something that might be underneath that is really getting to the detail of what the real problem is, and that's where you want to be because that's when you can really help. So yeah, I found there's a lot of commonality there.
And we have a similar discussion within our business between, we have account managers and then we have salespeople, and salespeople are the people that kind of open the doors, and then account managers are the people that foster, grow, land, and expand the relationship. Um, what are your kind of key tactics for making sure, obviously you don't have to give away the secret sauce, John, but what are your key tactics for making sure you do develop these strategic accounts, that you do, bring the customer with you as you develop these projects, and then get retained business and develop these accounts?
Yeah, I think that understanding the customer's needs, desires, and wants is one of the key things, really. Because if you don't understand that well enough, then you're not really in a good place to be able to help them to get what they need and understand what the problems are. Um, so yeah, I think that's a big one. Obviously, that helps the more the longer you spend together, the more you get to understand those things. And I think reflecting backwards a little bit as well on when certain things happen, and maybe clients have responded in a certain way, you can learn from that to be able to say, right, okay, actually we should be aware of this for next time, I'll be aware of this for when something might happen in the future. So I think that get that depth of understanding of how they operate, how they like to buy, because I think it's from if I put my pure kind of sales hat on, you need to understand how they actually go about buying things and who are the people, within the clients that do the buying of whatever it is, whether it was engineering, whether it's, commoditized goods and things like that. So yeah, I think that's the big thing, really, just the depth of understanding.
And I always find for myself, when you're dealing with customers over a period of time, it's also the way you deal with problems. It's a little bit like a marriage, isn't it? You kind of, you're going to have problems, you're going to have arguments, you're going to have difficulties at certain points. And I think, I think for me, and I guess you'll agree, sometimes it's the way that you deal, like sort out the issues, as opposed to, when it's all going well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think that's why it's key if you've got a good relationship, and your customer trusts that you will be able to help them through that sticky patch or through a difficult situation. And yeah, if you can be the one that's guided them through that, then absolutely, that's a great way to improve that relationship, add more value for the customer, and I think often those times as well can, you know, your customer might realize certain things about you as an organization or you as an individual that they didn't realize before. So it can be a really good opportunity to demonstrate different ways of working or different approaches because it's a different scenario. And then, it just makes them rethink a bit about, oh, okay, actually, you were really helpful here. Maybe you can help me in some other way. So yeah, I completely agree. I think helping them solve problems is a great way to add more value and
Yeah, and I think that builds that long-term relationship, doesn't it? I know that our biggest clients, if you have a number of contractors working, a number of projects, or a number of client relationships, or whatever, there's always going to be, and this is me, like as a CEO, sometimes I shit rises, right? So you can, like the problems generally come to you. So, and how you work those out, I always think if you can kind of work these out, you're kind of stepping up, aren't you? You're stepping up in terms of the relationship, and I mean, you would prefer it never to be any issues, but if you deal with those
yeah.
issues well, then I think you have a better relationship, don't you?
I fully agree. Yeah, I think that it's a great way of developing that relationship for sure. And I think it's hard as well, because selling anyone that's in a sales role, it's a challenging role and it's not always very forgiving. And I think if you can find a way of being able to demonstrate your value and your customer trusts you, then it's frankly, it's much easier to continue to develop that and continue working there than it is to go out and try and find somebody new to work with to fill that gap if you were to lose that customer, for example.
Hmm. So let's talk more about Consult Red, which is obviously a leader in the broadcast and, like you said, the pay TV technology, which is obviously something that GCS is heavily involved with. But is, every time I'm in it, I just think of it as a bit of a. I like it because people are constantly trying to progress things forward, right? It's an arms race in terms of equipment, in terms of way of delivering the media, because loads and loads of different companies trying to win, which I quite like. It's great to see. Tell us a bit about Consult Red and how they fit into this world.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe a very brief history. I think it was founded in very deep in kind of engineering 21 years ago now, I think, or 22 years ago. 5 engineers, really just, they were well versed in solving customers' problems in pay TV. So they knew their stuff, and they still know their stuff. And it was, yeah, I think it's always been about just trying to help. And I guess one of our fundamental philosophies is what we hear a lot is our customers say, when things get challenging, we pick up the phone and call Consult Red because we are very much kind of in that, like, give us a, we're all engineers, and I think the difference between what we do is we've kind of got our own this mix of we've got our own culture of what it is to be at Consult Red, but we also can be very adaptive to that when we're delivering for our customers. So we kind of take the shape of our customer when we deliver, but at the same time, we still got our own culture for what it is to be a Consult Red person. And I think what that means is it's kind of like inherent innovation, inherent inquisitiveness of the people that we have. And I think that's what allows us to do what we do. And that's what puts us in that position of when the customer has a challenging problem and, they're stuck on some kind of technical aspect of what they do, they pick up the phone and call Red, and yeah, and usually we can help them. And exactly as you said before, what that helps to do then is when you've helped solve that problem for them, isn't that a great way to be able to have kind of continued work and engagement?
And the key market that you work in, I mean, I think you say it's on the website, is connected devices, right? So, different devices within the home, within, the car, I guess, or something, talking to each other, connecting with the internet, you know, bringing technology to kind of all aspects of our lives. And I guess all of us listening today would think, well, that must be a good market to be in. There's so much progress. You're seeing new devices all the time. Is that something that I guess the strategic element of it, is that something that you have strategically focused on, or you're kind of pleased to be in that area?
Well, I think it's funny that because connected devices now is more or less any device, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's the
From your
that's
fridge, from your
the
fridge to your satellite, right? Yeah.
exactly, and everything in between. And I
Mm.
think now more than ever. That's always kind of been our philosophy. We've kind of been that connected devices. Our roots have been in pay TV, but that is now a connected device as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So it would
I
we're
actually
still
saw
there.
the
We're
other
still
day. I don't know. I can't remember who it was. I will put it up in the chat. But it's a kind of connected device for your dog with his like collar. So it's like a
I've
connected
seen those.
devices,
Yeah,
and it will tell you where your dog is if you lose him when he's out walking or something.
got like a little map.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's like wow, everything's connected now. So
Exactly, and I think this is that's the direction of travel. And I think if you assume that's the case and that everything will be connected at a point in time, I think that we're in the right place to be able to help there. And yeah, I guess our background, as I say, I mentioned pay TV. We do a lot in broadband CP. I think that's quite an exciting area at the moment in terms of what's happening there and what that might look like in the future. But I mean, we've done tons of weird and wonderful stuff as well. I mean, we've been doing stuff on like EV chargers, for example, EV chargers sending selling power back to the grid, I think, is one of the projects we've done. So it's not we're not just set top box and TV. And I think a lot of people, when they look at Red, I guess they've got that they'll think Red embedded even, and kind of have this picture of what we do. But actually, there's a lot of weird and wonderful things that we've been involved in or asked to do for the reasons I said before. They're kind of like, we've got this problem. Can you help with this? We're not sure if you can, but it's so it's yeah, it's an interesting ecosystem. It's an interesting time to be in the ecosystem for us, and I think, yeah, it's gonna for the future for us looks probably very varied compared to our, pay TV roots that we've seen 15, 20 years ago.
And I guess, you move with the different technologies as they move along, and you could be agnostic about that because you're developing solutions for your customers. What sort of things, you mentioned broadband CPE there? What sort of things are you as Consult Red particularly excited about kind of coming in the next 12, 24 months? Because there's so much change, there's so much development within technology in the technology world in all areas. But I'm sure you guys are, I guess what you're trying to do all the time is to kind of keep ahead, right? I'm trying to kind of keep ahead of these technologies so I can kind of be there and meet them when my customers, my strategic accounts start to be interested in them.
Yeah. Yeah, so, broadband is, for me, it's an area I'm very interested in. It's an area that we're focusing a lot, at Consult Red, and one of the exciting things that's happening there is, containerization technology. So, and what that's enabling is just this more modular approach to just delivering the service. So you're seeing a lot of, and by that, so effectively, kind of transitioning to this, a little bit like we saw in the mobile industry, where you kind of you get your phone, it runs Android or it runs iOS, but on top of that, you have the applications, and they're the things that really set it apart. Like that combination of applications that you pick is different for every person, and it's that's the thing that builds the experience between their user and their phone. In the broadband space, it's not executed in the same way. It's very different because that interaction between a user and the broadband CPE, so the gateways or routers they've got in their home, is provided by the operator, or the ISP, and they want to be able to own that experience and what that experience is like for the user. So what we're really seeing is, um, the introduction of, and this was happening anyway. Actually, it wasn't bringing in these new services wasn't new. So cybersecurity, Wi-Fi management, kind of being able to pick and prioritize which apps in the home that are prioritized. And if you're doing a Teams call from home, you want to make sure that doesn't drop out. So you put that above, like, I don't know, your child downstairs who's watching YouTube, for example. So those kind of that's not new,
Don't
but I
think I
think
could get away with that in my house, John. That would be that would be more than my life's worth. But yeah, I see your point.
yeah, but yeah, when the little one figures out how to make that work on the router, then you're doomed, I guess. But, so that's not new, but what is new is the way in which that these services are being delivered to the router. So it used to be that you would have just a single massive software build, which included these apps. So, if you follow that logic through, what that means is at the time of delivering the device to the individual, they need to have the apps on it with whatever the latest version of that app is. Now, it that means it's relatively static then in terms of being able to do any future updates. If someone brings out a really great new app or service that could be used on that device, it's difficult to be able to bring that in, test it, and make sure, the knock-on effect of bringing that app in, isn't detrimental to the performance of the router. So what this containerization does is effectively give you a layer upon which you can build these apps and services. So the modularity there and the flexibility you get with that is really, exciting. And I think as well, from an engineering perspective, in terms of, these operators and how they just go about developing their products, it makes it a lot easier as well because they can roll out small things and pull them back relatively easy, whereas that was a bit more of a challenge before. So from a user perspective, there's big benefits. From an engineering or operator perspective, there's also big benefits. So I think that's what's driving a lot of the interest that we're seeing. And if you take that further and look a little bit ahead at where that might end up, you think of, what the smart home is going to look like. You said before that all devices are connected. All those devices in the home are connected, and that router is the gateway is the gateway of which all that traffic is going through. So the intelligence that actually lives within that device now is phenomenal, and it's way beyond anything we've ever seen before. So if you take that and then we've got a mechanism now of being able to very quickly process large amounts of data in using AI. Actually, there's a lot more use cases that get unlocked as a result of this kind of convergence of all these things happening at this time. So, as I say, broadband is an exciting time at the minute.
And do you find in your role, part of your role is to go out and talk to people? Kind of, we've recently had an evangelist for DevOps, but evangelizing these things. These are things you could do. Putting ideas into people's heads.
As always with any of these kind of conversations, it's usually about okay, but what's the use case? An operator would really be interested in that if it helps them to drive up ARPU or retain customers for longer. So that's what they really want to see. So I think yes, and it it's there definitely should be evangelists for the kind of technology in the direction that it's heading. And I think working back from that to go, well, look, here are the things that need to be in place for that to happen. And actually, it's not a big stretch. There's a process to go through to get there, but it's actually not a big stretch if you follow this kind of train of thought and logic. So if you can do that and paint that picture as to this is what the future will look like, work back from that today to today and say, okay, well, these are the things you probably want to be considering doing now. For example, with AI will play a big part. I think when selecting your hardware, there's technology that exists now to be able to put neural processing units in the devices in the gateway. So if you want to make sure you're making the right technological decisions today for unlocking those use cases tomorrow, you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot there, right? You want to make sure that okay, you might not need it today, but help influence that
You
decision that
want to
is
you
being
want
made
to
today.
future proof it, and you want to be
Exactly.
thinking about that technology roadmap that you might have down the line. Um, and when you think about the skills that you need, obviously, if it's so fast progressing, that I'm assuming that the technologies, the skill sets, etc., constantly change. How do you hire around that? I mean, obviously, this is an important question for me as a running a recruiting business, but how do you go about that? Because constantly technologies and needs are changing, so it's very difficult for an individual to keep up.
Yeah, agreed. And I guess it's inherent in technology, right? It evolves constantly. It's always changing and developing, and but that is a good thing. I think for me, it's about I mentioned a little bit before about moving into the role and picking up the skills later. I think as a concept, I think that has to be part of it. And I think when you're hiring people, it's really about looking at what skills do they have? Do they have a good kind of underlying set of skills? But more importantly, I think, is what are their behaviors and what's their approach to work and what's their approach to learning and find because what you really want to do is you want to make sure that they're coming in with the right behavior set and the right approach to say when they come across a problem that they can't solve, they go, "Oh, I don't know about that, but I probably should learn about it. How do I go about understanding this in more detail?" And just having that inquisitive nature, I think, is really important. So having the balance of do they have the fundamental skills that I need? If an engineer has no engineering experience, obviously it's a big gap, but they have a good kind of underlying
Surely you'd
engineering
say that
experience.
you could surmount that, John. You're that guy.
I wouldn't go that far. I certainly wouldn't go that far. But no, so I think it's really that. And, to me, that's been a big important part of when you're picking the right people. For me, the right people look like the ones that have got the right behaviors and approach to the work. If there's a gap on the skills, you can fix that, right? You can always learn something. It's more difficult to be able to tweak and change your approach to something. That's kind of like within something that's within you as a person, right? It's more and more cultural in an environment, a work environment as well.
Does that then switch like the interview process? Obviously, when we work with technology firms, there's a lot of tech tests. There's a lot of skills-based interviewing, that sort of thing. Is that something maybe at Consult Red do you try to think about differently?
I think we do, the nature of what we do is our engineers have a broad range. They're not kind of really focused on one coding language. So we would, I guess, be actively trying to find those that have, they've got the skill of being able to learn new languages and pick up those quickly, because of, the winds may change and all of a sudden the flavor of the day might mean we have to learn a different programming language to support a client or AI tells us suddenly we need to all be learning about a different particular technology type. So I think, yes, it's got to be part of the hiring process. I think there's got to be things there that allow you to be able to measure that. Um, but yeah, I don't know if anyone has completely cracked that nut yet. I think, there's probably always a little bit of a debate around whether actually no, we should definitely focus on the skills more than we focus on the behaviors, because what they need to do might be very niche. But no, I think I would always be the big advocate of where you can make that around the getting the right person in and fill the skills gap if you need to.
I think sometimes for me, like we use a lot of kind of video interviewing technologies. So to kind of take short form videos, show that to the client. I think sometimes the CVs can be something that stops that more holistic view of recruitment. You know, so long you like look at the CV and you switch off because they haven't got X skill set and X skill set and X skill set. And obviously a CV is in such a specific format, isn't it? You know, and it's so easy to say no, 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 yes, um, which is what clients do, and it's kind of understandable. But at the same time, I know for a fact, and I always say to my consultants that basically, if you haven't got a job, right, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong if you're listening to this and you disagree, but if you haven't got a job and you're really looking for a job, then you're going to have a lot of time to spend writing a really good CV. But if you're really, really good at your job and integral and busy, then you haven't got a load of time to write a really good CV.
Mm.
So I always say to people, just speak to everyone, because sometimes the best candidates, definitely in the engineering world, have got the worst CVs.
It's a really good point, actually. I like that way of looking at it, because yeah, if I was told, actually, I was speaking to someone a few weeks ago on this, and we were talking about my CV, and if you look at my CV,
It's a
well,
great it's a great CV, John. A great CV. Love it. Or your LinkedIn profile. You're no
well, it
Rachel
doesn't have
Reeves here.
everyone. People have people know the right buzzwords to put in and things like that to convert, getting an interview from a CV. That's not, and you're exactly right. It's not. I've only ever updated my CV when I've been looking for work, and I'm fortunate that I've been in a position where I've been employed through, through the majority of my life. I've not had any gaps in my employment. Touch wood. But you're right, and you might find engineers in their nature, they might have a specific way of thinking, and does that mean, some engineers might not have that more creative writing side that's needed? It's the engineers usually very factual, kind of focused on the on what are the facts, and what do I need to be able to solve a problem. Writing a CV, I imagine, takes probably a lot of engineers very much outside their comfort zone. So how do you it's a good question. How do you make sure you still capture what you need to determine, well, what does a good engineer look like from, a lot of engineering CVs? I guess it becomes more of a challenge. And I think, yeah, I guess there are certain clues, right, that you might look for. There are things like, have they, when they've moved between jobs, have they been able to pick up new languages, new technologies, and new domains quickly, and being able to, and progress in their roles in doing that? So I guess there's other signs you might look for, but yeah, I can't imagine it's one size fits all either.
I guess that's fortunately where a good recruitment agent comes in. So that's our job, to kind of work these things out. But I genuinely think it's something that, particularly like you say, as technology constantly evolves, where you're looking for behaviors and cultural fit as much as you're looking for technology, that you have to be very aware of. And it's something that we try to kind of work with our clients. And talking about kind of creative and engineering, John, I know obviously you're in the next, or coming up in the next few weeks, you're moving into the world of podcasting yourself. I don't think you've used me as your inspiration, but I'm sure there's other people out there. But yeah, it's great to see. So tell us a bit about your podcast.
This is something that I very much, for this year, tried to take a force myself outside my comfort zone year, and this was something I've been kind of playing around with for a long time, probably since the middle of last year. And I was trying to find all the reasons that I need, all the things that I needed to do around the fringes of just getting a podcast started. And, I kind of had to have a talk to myself at the beginning of this year and say, you know what, just go out, find the people, have the conversation that I want to have, and get it out there, and the rest will come. So I've kind of taken that approach at the beginning of this year. So I've launched Simply Connected, and it's about all the things I was talking about before around this kind of specifically around broadband, all the innovation that we're seeing. I'm trying to find, you know, the right people to be able to talk on some of these areas. And exactly as you said, actually, find those evangelists who are the ones that really know, that have a deep knowledge on certain aspects of this. And what does that mean? And what are the problems we might face? And how do we as a community? Because I think, technology is fantastic in that it's a community and everybody wants to solve those problems. And someone will, and on one occasion that might be Consult Red, on one occasion it might be someone else, but you know, that propels everything forward. And I think it's quite exciting to be able to, I've done one episode so far, recorded, and it's, yeah, it needs to go out. It should be out by the time this one goes out, actually. So I'll be interested to get
You'll
some
be all
news
over
from
the
from
internet,
it.
John.
And podcasting
That's
on
right. Yeah, we'll put a link up on when we post this. And I mean, from my side, it's just a great way of speaking to. I mean, your job is speaking to customers, right? This is a great way of building relationships and speaking to customers, and that's why I keep doing this. There's so many interesting people out there. And I think
yeah.
that's how I like to bring in. We like I said, we've met a few times, and I was like, John's going to be good for this because he's an interesting guy. He's got some interesting things to say, but I think you have to come at it from like with all things, you have to come at it from I really enjoy having conversations with people, right? The people are interesting.
Exactly. And I know the big part of what I do is just that, is like going and having a conversation and being naturally inquisitive and asking questions. It's very easy for me. So if I can do that for a job, isn't that a great way to make a living?
Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? Yeah, so that's right. Well, maybe we could do a joint podcast, John. We'll do it together. It would be great.
I'm sure I can find the time.
And so for yourself, what are you excited for kind of the year ahead? In terms of your focus, your priorities.
Yeah. So I mentioned before, for me, 2025 is the year of being outside my comfort zone. The podcast is the start of that. And I think just even more, even though I'm getting out and talking to people, I think I'm just to do more of that, really. And what I'm doing now, my role is kind of, whilst being account focused, there's also an element of my role which is going out and speaking to new people, at trade shows and events and things like that, which again I really enjoy doing. It gets me to meet new people. So that's one. The other way I've pushed myself outside my comfort zone actually was rekindling a bit of my youth, and I've gone, and I don't know, maybe the midlife crisis approaching, but I've joined a band. So I've
All right.
started playing drums again with some pals, and yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Well,
So
we'll also
personally,
post this up as well, John. What? Give me. I'm a big music fan, so what would you say your inspirations are?
I've been told. So I joined late. These were guys that were already playing, and I kind of stepped in. But it's people I know from my past. I've been told it sounds like kind of 70s rock.
I like it.
I guess is the kind of style, but there might be a bit
Are
of
you
a
talking
change.
about
I think
Fleetwood Mac, the Eagles here, or more Black Sabbath or Led Zeppelin
more
or
like
something? Or
a bit kind of funky rock. Yeah, yeah. I don't know how I'd label it. I'll send you.
oh, yeah, definitely. We'll definitely put this up, and maybe we'll have a little theme tune at the start, as played by John Barlow. So yeah. What do you play, John?
I play drums.
Oh, fantastic! Oh, that's really good. So yeah. So your
Some of
wife.
my Consult Red colleagues may. Yeah, I did. We have a summer party, and I think at 1 or 2 days' notice, there was a band that were playing there, and one of my colleagues said, "Hey, you fancy playing a couple of songs?" They gave me songs and 2 days to learn them, and then we did a little bit at the summer party. So that, I think that probably reignited my interest in doing something new.
Brilliant. Well, you're multi-talented, I think. With multi-talented John Barlow, podcaster, drummer, business leader, evangelist of technology. I think you're ticking many boxes there, John. So it's been great to speak to you today. Good luck with your podcast. Good luck with obviously everything with regards to Consult Red, and I'm sure we'll meet up at some seminars and exhibitions soon. But yeah, I mean, it's been great speaking to you, and thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me, David.